operating experience, including emergency incident command. I don't advertise. I don't need the business. And as a representative of the public and promulgation of pipeline safety regulations, I have an ethical obligation to minimize. In fact, I actually cut loose. I don't do any industry. I actually sign disclosures to the federal government saying, I don't even own stock in their companies. So you can form your own opinion. I'm here today not to terrify you, but you are owed the truth. High-pressure gas transmission pipelines command much respect. As a person who may be impacted by a pipeline failure, you have the right to and should demand the truth about the Southside Connector. To date, too much pipeline information presented concerning this project from its proponents and the city's industry consultants is misleading, incomplete, deceptive, or downright false. Such public relations spin tactics, I have found, frustrate elected officials who are trying to make informed decisions for their citizens in the city. The city has a special clause in an easement agreement concerning the Southside Connector project, giving the city rights to rescind. After much misinformation, it was finally publicly disclosed that the Southside Connector is a 24-inch gas transmission pipeline with a maximum allowable operating pressure, or MAOP, of 1,250 psig. MAOP is specifically defined in minimum pipeline safety regulations and has a special meaning. Having agreed to permit a 24-inch 1,250 MOP pipeline to be routed or placed across the center of the city, I believe the City Council has the right to demand straight answers from VNG. Without such important information, the project should be placed on hold or that agreement rescinded. On November 20th, 2018, the City Council was presented with two reports concerning the connector that had been labeled as independent safety reviews. Based on my extensive experience, neither of these reports is independent, neutral, or objective. Both of these reports give way too many technical issues wrong and appear to be cheerleading for VNG. These reports are lacking important pipeline technical details that would be necessary to support their many observations or conclusions. This is not surprising because VNG started its deceit by misleading the City Council into believing the project is a distribution pipeline. It was only after the mayor publicly called out VNG on November 20th that they finally acknowledged the obvious fact. The connector is a transmission pipeline. It is a rather simple truth that high-pressure gas transmission pipeline rupture failures, especially in Norfolk, would have much greater consequences than a distribution pipeline. Transmission pipelines can fail as leaks, but they also can fail as a rupture, usually without warning. Ruptures occur in microseconds and are large, high-energy releases explained by the science of pipe fracture mechanics and the compressibility of thousands of tons of natural gas within a pipeline. Pipeline ruptures have much greater consequences and much larger actual impact areas than distribution pipelines. Gas transmission pipeline ruptures can eject tons of pipe steel, even when buried deep, forming large craters and generating multiple explosions and massive fireballs. Transmission pipeline routing in highly populated areas, especially high-density cities such as Norfolk, is very rare and should be permitted only after an open and transparent process for all to hear and have input to help assure prudent decisions are made. Such openness and transparency has not happened with the Southside Connector project. Having been caught with mislabeling the Connector project as a distribution pipeline, One of the city's hired consulting experts is now trying to convince the city council that the pipeline would be operated at lower pressures most of the time as a distribution pipeline. Thus, this lower operating pressure safety argument is reckless. It ignores the importance of MAOP in minimum pipeline safety regulation and operation. The pipeline operator, once MOP has been established, can increase pipeline pressures up to and in excess of MAOP at any time in the future, even during the first day of operation or years later, without getting approval from pipeline safety regulators. There is no written agreement or regulation that would keep BNG at any time from increasing the pressure. Trying to make you feel safe because another pipeline is operated thus far at lower pressures is dangerous and fails to grasp how quickly pipeline pressures can increase. This is another line of false and/or misleading arguments concerning the Southside Connector by VNG or its cheerleaders, who should focus on telling the truth. I have additional comments, but I can wait for later on so they don't put these people to sleep.
Well, we do have if we have time, question and answer. But I think that one I'd like to ask you now, if it's okay. Do you have an idea of how large of an area that might be destroyed if there were a single incident, maybe in acres?
I don't know about acres. I can just give you distance from the pipeline. It's probably easily twice the potential impact radius.
Could we bring that slide up again?
1,500 feet. Again, the number.
Maybe we can answer it right now.
No, technology's going to kill us all. I make my living because technology drives people crazy. It's doing it right now.
So this is the image that we've been sharing about the impact zone, and I think that's what this question was asking. And how many people might be in an area with this population density?
You're probably around your, and don't be exact, it's 1,500 feet. Now, let me point out, because I was involved in the regulation and development when we finally agreed into discussions for potential impact radius to define high consequence areas for gas transmission pipeline integrity management. That regulatory attempt was never, ever to be utilized to cite a gas transmission pipeline. Okay? The original attempt by industry was going to establish high consequence areas at roughly 1% of the total gas transmission pipelines in the United States. That was roughly 300,000 miles, depending on what database you look at, for gas transmission. And my response to the industry and their lobbyists was, you present that information to the public, and they're going to crucify you. So let's get a better number here. So they came up with this formula that was empirically derived, not a citing tool, that essentially targeted 7.3% of the 300,000 miles of gas transmission pipeline. So I'll just caution, gas transmission pipelines, and you can get this battling of experts. Is it 1,500? Is it 4,000? As big as they are, it isn't going to matter in a highly populated area.
And Richard, I'm going to jump, and I'm sorry we don't have the graphic tool we'd like to have. But for instance, if you had that accident at Harbor Park, 1,500 feet, it'd be 750 this way, 750 that way. So it would involve the entire Harbor Park Stadium, I can tell you that. It would involve the interstate, I can tell you that. I can tell you it would impact some of the city facilities over here, and it would be a horrible problem right there. I can tell you that it would involve several of these schools along the pipeline route. I can tell you it would be heavily impactful to the St. Paul area where the city is planning a huge new redevelopment. They are planning to spend more than $1 billion in new, modern housing, mixed use, retail. They're trying to build a new part of the city in this area, and the pipeline goes right through it. So, and we also think developers who are very smart people about how they make their plans and build their properties and
science is real. The science will tell you the heat radiation from these fireballs, multiple explosions, is so great, it'll liquefy steel and vaporize aluminum. Your survival of your body is measured in seconds. That's just the reality. The science is out there. I'm not trying to scare you. It just commands, have you really thought this through of what you're doing? And are you telling the truth? And if you can't do that, where are you not telling the truth? Because certain facts are going to take you to where you need to get those facts in order to make it informed. And that's where the city council is, I believe. This isn't the first time I've seen a city council being lied to. All right? It's a tough job, and they need to ferret this out. They have the power to get straight answers to straight technical questions. And until they get them, they ought to just call V&G and say, guess what? We want some honest answers so we can make an informed decision. That's fair.
From Virginia Natural Gas that Hampton Roads, specifically the city of Norfolk, needs this gas. And well, we've kind of figured out that that might not be true. If Norfolk isn't going to end up being the users or consumers for this gas, who is? Is this gas for domestic or global use? Or do we know for sure?
I'm going to ask for the map, the pipeline map. Okay, thank you. And this has been a mystery that I've tried to figure out for a year. And the truth is, I do not have it figured out, but I've learned a lot, and I've been able to analyze it in ways that I think explain a lot. It would have been very simple for V&G to tell us. They tell us things like, you know, it's for growth, it's we're having outages. When they took us to court, we were able to take depositions and demand that they provide certain information. They said they were unable to supply gas on certain days. There were certain customers that they couldn't supply gas to. The truth is, there were none. There were zero in Norfolk and Chesapeake. And they were under oath. It was in court. They had to tell the truth. There were a number of what is called interruptible customers that were on the peninsula over here, 11 to be exact, that reached a point where they had to constrain their gas supply during peak heating days. It was just a few days in the extreme cold snap of last year. Those are facts that are found in the court records, and V&G told us that information under oath, so I believe it to be true. What we were able to find out is that we are getting all the gas we need from the two pipelines, the one that is up to the north, that comes down the peninsula and crosses over into Norfolk, and the Columbia line that comes in from the south. We could not find anybody in Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, or Norfolk that went lacking for gas supply. Now, does that mean there isn't a need to have more gas in the future? Yes, that could be possibly true. We don't know when, we don't have that data. But we also know that the Atlantic Coast Pipeline is coming down here, and it's going to tie in up here. And then you're going to have 3 pipelines supplying this area, which is a huge amount of gas supply into this region. Now, what we now believe, and of course, V&G called this the Southside Distribution Connector. It is not the Southside Distribution Connector. If you look up here, that was their title. The proper title. The better way to describe it, the way that it's going to work, is it's the Eastern Virginia Regional Gas Transmission Connector. It's not going to just connect these 2 lines. When the ACP comes in down here, it's going to connect 3 transmission lines. And it's going to allow them to move gas in both directions, north and south, east and west. So it's a very clever idea to connect those major transmission pipelines. It is not about putting gas in Norfolk. It's not about heating homes in Norfolk. It's not about taking care of the local need directly in the city. It was just really convenient to run it through Norfolk and make these connections. And, you know, I could talk about this for hours, and I'm trying to keep it fairly simple. That is what's going on with this transmission connector. And of course, I'm not V&G. V&G could come in here and argue and debate that, but there's no other economic, business, or technical explanation for it. It's just a good way to make it efficient, convenient, and cheap from their point of view to get those pipelines all connected. And it happens to be very unfortunate that Norfolk is right in the middle of those three connecting points. Okay, is that helpful?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
One other question.
Well, I just need to add to Tom's
Please
comment.
do.
That's a question that the city council could ask the V&G, and just say, look, you're gonna give us the breakdown of where's this gas going to go, right? A 20-inch or a 24-inch, 1250 MAOP gas transmission pipeline can move over, in my experiences that I've seen a lot, can move well over 1 billion cubic feet a day. That's well beyond the needs of that whole area up there, unless there are new power plants coming in. All right?
And that was how many billion?
1 billion plus.
1 billion plus
Billion standard cubic feet per day.
And we don't use that much gas. I do a lot of cooking at home, and
Check your bill.
that's true. Thank you for that. Another question, and then I think I'd like to introduce us to some students, some high school students from Norfolk. This is more about the construction of the pipe itself. The pipeline wells, will they be stringently evaluated? Have they been, have the state safety standards been addressed, the wells of the pipeline?
Well, this is an area where VNG, on its appearance, seems to be doing the right thing. I think I've heard that they're going to have all their girth wells that connect the pipe sections together radiographically inspected. That's a good thing. It's not required in federal regulations. Depends on the area classification or class location. So that would be a story where if you're doing something right, say what you're doing right. Okay? Now there's some details missing from that statement that need to be followed through by the city council. Because you can expect them, but you can also tamper with them, like it happened in the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. They had to go do a lot of re-welding after the radiographic welds all were alike. And radiographic welds for X-rays or gamma rays are like fingerprints. They're all unique.
Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce you to 3 students from Norfolk. Lydia Faulkner, she is founder of the Norfolk Environmental.
To get the record entirely straight, so let me disappoint you now. I think I can fix a few of the things that you need to get corrected and clarified. And I want to talk about my part of the story, and then I'm going to go more toward what I think the concerns of the general public should be. You know, again, we learned about this just about a year ago, fourth quarter 2017, when a third party came to our business and asked for an easement. And there was very little information provided. I mean, we started to ask questions and started to try to understand what the pipeline was going to do and how it would affect us. And it was going right through the center of what we call our new shipyard, which is a combination of our West Yard and Spottico Creek. It's going right through the middle where we have made a $75 million investment in the last 10 years. And it's going right through a point on our waterfront property where we plan to put a very important new pier. The pier is necessary. We need more space for vessels. Our business has grown. And if we had $150 million, we probably already would have had the pier in there, but we had to budget. And so we asked all those questions. And we had a couple of meetings directly with VNG. And we said, how do we put the pier in? How do we put bulkheads in? How do we make sure vessels are safe? How do we transit heavy cranes and all the big equipment and all the big structure that we move back and forth across that ground? And they told us verbally, we think you'll be okay. We think you can do that. We asked for engineering. We asked for firm guidance. We asked for restrictions. We said, tell us, give us the instructions that we're going to have to follow to operate safely this shipyard. I've got this responsibility to all these people. Tell us. We got nothing, and we got nothing in writing. And, you know, I told you we ended up, because they sued us, basically in court, fighting over that easement. It's all very, very unfortunate. It didn't need to be that way. You see, back in January of this year, we were not trying to hold up progress. We were not trying to really stop a pipeline. We simply wanted to make it safe. And we were selfish. We were trying to make it safe for Colonna. And we said, please move that pipeline just over to the western boundary of our property. Take it out of the middle of our shipyard. Take it away from that dry dock. Take it away from that pier so we can still conduct our business and not be troubled with that conflict. And they agreed to go look at it. And then they let us know about a week later, nope, not going to do that. Well, right then and there, we said, this is wrong. We are trying to work with you. We are trying to be constructive. We thought at that time Norfolk needed the gas. I mean, honestly, I was sitting there January this year, I thought Norfolk really needed this gas. I didn't know what I have just explained to you about this transmission pipeline. It was still called a distribution pipeline. And so now, a year later, I've become very, maybe hard in my thinking that the way they approach this, it's their way, it's unilateral, they choose every inch of the location, they determine what kind of pipeline it is, they don't really care about the adverse impact, certainly not in Colonna's, not in the neighborhood of Berkeley, not at Harbor Park, they just really don't care, they just want their pipeline. So that's my personal opinion, and I think you could probably, by that background, understand my thinking. Some people in the city have been told it's about Colonna's and money. I offered them that location on our western boundary, which would take up some significant part of our waterfront and a piece of acreage for $100,000. When they took, in a court-determined proceeding, that waterfront point on our property, they unilaterally put a value of $25,000 on it. Okay? So I want to stop talking about money, but they say Colonna's is out after money. We're out protecting a $75 million investment, and they took a big hunk of it for $25,000. True story, and I'm happy to talk about that, but I'm not going to waste this time because it should be about safety. So please allow me to liberate my hard feelings about this, and we'll move on and talk about safety. We have up to 12 vessels dried out in the area of that pipeline. We have to make them safe. We're going to have to make some serious adaptations to the facility and the way we operate to be sure they're safe. I wish things like this didn't end up with legal disputes, but here are some things that I discovered as I've been working on this now for a year. There was no federal review of this pipeline, which is a requirement for interstate pipelines. This is deemed an intrastate pipeline, therefore there was no federal review. FERC is the one that administers those federal reviews. They're very extensive, they involve safety, they involve environmental, they involve studying the location to make sure it's the location that's the best location. We got none of that. There was no public notice that described this pipeline truthfully, and there was nobody in this room knew about this a year ago, I'm going to bet, except for some folks down in Chesapeake. There were some folks in Chesapeake where it kind of landed first, and they got up to speed real quick. But people in Norfolk were not told about this when the city approved a right-of-way agreement. And so how can you do something like this without notifying the public, without airing, all that information? Think about any other transportation infrastructure. If there was a new railroad line going through Norfolk, there'd be a huge public notice. If there was a new interstate highway going through Norfolk, there would be a lot of notice. Things like that require notice just as the right thing to do. You know, if you're going to live next to a refinery, you know it, and you get a chance or a choice about that's what you're going to do, and you know there's a risk. In this case, people are finding the risk, landing in their neighborhood, landing in their city. They didn't even have proper notice about it. We could find not one safety study from the state of Virginia, the city of Norfolk, or V&G. We asked for them. Up until this one that was provided to Norfolk a few weeks ago, there were 0 safety studies. None. Okay? That's a fact. Can be verified. There was no information or safety analysis about the location of this pipeline. And that's really the biggest issue. I mean, at the end of the day, you can walk away from this town hall and you're going to have a few important things that stick with you. The important thing about locating a pipeline is to locate it in the safest place. And for instance, in studying Norfolk, if it had to touch Norfolk, there probably is safer places when you look at population density, when you look at development, when you look at Harbor Park. Yeah, this pipeline might really serve a purpose and it might have some necessary use. But move it to the safest place it can be. That's the way it's done 99% of the time around the country. They put it in the best safe location. We didn't get that opportunity. There was no environmental study to assess the pipeline. They did get a permit from the Army Corps of Engineers, and they operate under a national permit, which frankly is sort of you can pass boardwalk and go straight to whatever the next place is on the Monopoly game. There was no real study done to consider the environmental impact to Norfolk. There was no economic impact study done. And what does that mean? That means looking at land use. And is it going to change, alter, modify, impair the land use around that particular pipeline? Is it going to affect property values? Is it going to affect zoning in the future? Is it going to be imposed on the city of Norfolk to say there's certain things that can't be done adjacent to that pipeline, and we're going to have to create setbacks? That study was not done. It's still not been done. It's really important. It's a big deal. It does happen when responsible people go to get that study. It's not been done. I'm going to say this is a little sensitive, and I'm going to apologize if I offend anyone. There was no concern about the fairness and the equality with respect to how the pipeline was routed. It is having a very negative impact on communities that are challenged, communities that are minority, communities that don't have resources and assets to voice concerns and opposition. So that is unacceptable. And I thought we were getting rid of those kind of things in this country, and here it is. People aren't fighting for it. And it's something we need to do as a community. There are folks here from all over this city, and maybe it's not directly in your neighborhood, but would you feel okay about it being right at someone's doorstep, 30 foot away from their house? Would you feel okay about that? It's wrong. And I think all of us should be offended. There is no direct benefit for the host cities of Chesapeake and Norfolk. And listen, I am still looking for that, and if V&G wants to come in here and deliver all the direct benefits, sometimes things are looked at from a cost-benefit point of view. Where is the benefit? What do you get? What is the value? What are the things that you come away with, and it makes it a better future for Norfolk? Don't see it. There were no security studies done, as Captain Bouchard pointed out, to consider the risk to our great defense industrial base, the Navy, and some strategic things along this pipeline route. There's none. The government hasn't done it. No one's done it. This was not an innocent local gas distribution pipeline, which is what it was described to be. It's a high-pressure, high-volume gas transmission pipeline. Why didn't they call it that 2 years ago when this thing was in, planning and when the concept was being worked on? Darn it, come on. Again, aren't we going to hold people accountable? Accountable. And where is the transparency? I'll tell you, when you walk out here tonight, you have the power to hold people accountable. There has not been that accountability, and you can point that at V&G, you can point that at the State Corporation Commission, you can point it at the city. Accountability, I'm sorry to say, has fallen on the shoulders of the citizens and the public. So, we're in the accountability business. There's been a lot of disappointments here. Please keep that in your mind when you leave here tonight. We know now the Southside Connector was not here to bring additional gas supply to Norfolk. It's just a fact. It's going to function, and it's going to, it's clearly going to connect those three major transmission lines. It's going to create a system that has benefits for the entire eastern part of the state, and I acknowledge that, but it didn't need to happen in downtown Norfolk. There has not been openness, there's not been transparency, there's still not. We have submitted, I'm talking about from the Colonna's group, from the 757 PSC group, more than 100 questions. And they're very serious questions, some of them very technical questions, like how do I put that pier down on top of that gas pipeline? No answers, none, okay? Now, that's not forthright. I'm not going to use all the words I could use. It took Mayor Alexander to pin down, this is a high-pressure transmission line. And that was a beatdown, a public beatdown, in front of consultants and TV cameras. Amazing. Think about that. It took the mayor of this city to get that fact stipulated to. Is that incredible or what? I mean, what are you dealing with? All right. So here we are. We have this high-pressure gas transmission pipeline running through our urban corridor. It's next to our schools. It's next to our ballpark. It's next to it's in our historic neighborhoods. It's running right through the middle of the planned St. Paul Renaissance, which is one of the most exciting things in the city's future. And I'm excited about that, and I'm not in that business, but I think it's just wonderful. You think that's not going to be a liability? Do you think it's a zero liability? I don't know anybody that believes that. I can't find any honest, objective person that believes that. It's beyond debate. All right, we want safety, okay? It is safety. I'm not worried about the shipyard today. I'm worried about safety. I'm worried about transparency. We want transparency. We want accountability. And it's time to get it. We haven't gotten it. We want Norfolk's future to be safe and better than its past, and we want it to be uncompromised. It's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do for this city and everybody who lives and works here. Uncompromised. Please don't compromise our future. We want the safety study done, and we want all these questions answered. We've got to have it. It's a huge thing. If it's done honestly, if it's done competently, if it's done with proper due diligence, it'll take some time. It must be done. It's irresponsible and reckless not to have those studies done. We're going to demand those studies be done. Please. Let's get this fixed. All right, thank you. I'm going to preach a little bit more. It's Sunday and I get a chance to preach. I'm looking for integrity. And I'm going to tell you, in the last 12 months, I've seen more disingenuous behavior than I've ever seen in my life. And I've seen integrity that leaves me severely disappointed as a human being. I'm going to tell you, I don't know any business in Norfolk that could operate like this and be so callous about honesty and transparency and how they conduct things that affect stakeholders and the public. We want integrity. I think the city council will ultimately work in that direction, and they're not used to being challenged like this. We're trying to stop a failure. We're trying to get a public problem fixed. And I'm going to say this, for all the right reasons, we need to be together. We should not disagree about safety. Think about it. Are we really going to have a dispute among us about safety? Why would you have a dispute with anybody about safety? It makes no sense. So part of this whole big problem just does not make sense. So, and I'm going to tell you, it doesn't have to be win or lose. The 757 PSC coalition is not saying pipelines, turn them all off, end them. You know, that's not the position of that coalition. It's saying this does not have to be a win or lose. It has to be a safe outcome. We're looking for a safe outcome. Right now, we're handing out a call to action. It's very simple. It gives you some information you need to look at. You need to take the time to go ahead and talk to your city council member, and all members if possible, including the mayor. They have to hear from you. They're getting a little worn out listening to me. And I can understand that. But it's time for them to hear from you. They have many things they can do to fix this. And I'm going to come back probably at the very, very end and explain it. But there's a provision in the right-of-way agreement that gives the city the right to revert that easement at any time that the pipeline is determined to be adverse to the city. It can be done now, it can be done tomorrow, it can be done anytime. They have that legal right. They designed a smart contract, and I'm going to give them credit for that. Now I'm going to go to one question, and Kim, forgive me, because this was a question that was in today's paper, the Virginia Pilot, and it's a good question, and it was in the form of a letter, and it was from a gentleman, Thomas Moore from Virginia Beach, and he wrote this short letter, and I'm going to read it, and then we're going to ask an expert to answer it, which I'm not. Pipeline question. The coverage of the Southside Connector Pipeline has not answered the most important question. What would happen in the event of a major failure of the pipeline? Opponents of the project have voiced fears of an explosion that would devastate a large area and its population. I tend to doubt that this would happen. I am not a pipeline engineer, but if I were, I would design the project so that a failure at any point could be immediately isolated, and the gas release would be so little that it would dissipate rapidly with no chance of detonation. This would require the installation of sensitive monitors at appropriate intervals and shutoff valves that would be automatically activated. In order to reduce the loss of revenue to Virginia Natural Gas, the pipeline would be designed to allow safe, fast, and efficient repair at all points. The answer to the question about a major failure should be that would be only a temporary loss of gas service in an affected area and no safety concern. Any other question would justify suspension of the construction and further investigation. If that is the correct answer, however, the project should proceed without further delay. From Mr. Thomas Moore. So I'm going to go to Mr. Kuprewicz, and I'm going to say, here's a thoughtful person who has a very good question. By the way, this is the type of questions we've been getting, over 100 of them, maybe 200 of them by the time we count up the cards that have come to us through this meeting. And so, Richard, what can we say to Tom Moore about this?
Well, I can respect this question, but unfortunately, there are a couple things there that are violating the fundamental laws of science. I think he's asking an honest, intentional question, but you can't instantly shut off a gas transmission pipeline rupture. And history has repeatedly showed the impact zones, the actual impact zones, and the NTSB reports are public. You can look at those. They'll give you some more science and information. They're very large impact zones. You can argue about whether it's 1,400, 1,500. It isn't going to really matter a whole lot if you're anywhere near it. And you can't instantaneously shut off the valves. You cannot have enough sensors. And by the way, I need to mention, I've heard somebody claim, I think it was in the independent reports, that pressure loss will be instantaneously or quickly recognized in the control center, and then they can activate shutting off the valves. By the time you see pressure loss in a gas transmission pipeline rupture, the big full bore blown out at 24 inches on both ends of the pipeline, you've already got the dead and dying. Okay? It just cannot happen that fast. And so I think it's well-meaning, but the realities are, in the industry, again, there are good people in this industry. They'll tell you the truth, that you may not like to hear it, but they'll try to be honest about it and try to do the best they can on dealing with these highly important issues. But it's back to what I said earlier. Gas transmission pipelines command much respect. So I just tell them, well, he means well, it's not scientific nor correct, nor does it follow what's actually occurred in way too many gas pipeline ruptures, many of which I've also investigated. So I think that's the answer. Oh, and by the way, even after you shut off valves, the laws of thermodynamics kick in, and for a 24-inch gas transmission pipeline at these pressures, it's going to continue to blow down and burn even after the valves are closed for quite some time. And the transient guys who can calculate the fracture transient dynamics will show you, there's actually plots that have been developed that say, this is how long it's going to burn. And your first responders can't do triage until those flames die down.
Thank you. And to follow up with that question, there are quite a few from our audience today asking about what type of compensation, what effects to home insurance, what legal avenues do residents have if there were to be an incident. But before you answered that, I have a question. How about that? When you've gone to sites that have had incidents like this, what we saw in the video earlier with the fireball explosion, loud explosion, very wide area, what did it look like?
You saw probably pictures of the California fires where the flames are generating at 90 miles an hour. It's going to be worse than that. The heat radiations are higher. In other words, the thermal radiations are even higher than that. This hydrocarbon burns extremely hot, and it's venting at the speed of sound in the gas, which is faster than the speed of sound in air. That's why you hear these large roars. You cannot tell direction. And I've been in situations where pipeline ruptures occurred, and as a trained, experienced incident commander, your first thing is to fight the panic, because the heat's coming from every direction, and the sound is so large, you don't know what direction it's coming from. And so you got to really, it takes a rare individual and training to deal with that properly.
Thank you. And again, just do you happen to know what legal recourse would residents have?
I used to think $1 billion was a lot of money in some of these cases. 40 years ago it was. The American justice system is, the legal process is unpredictable. I doubt if your insurance company is going to deny you insurance. Some people have claimed that. We've never run across a case. I've seen assertions of that, but I've never, when you go chase it down, the insurance companies aren't going to deny you insurance because they see it as a low probability. Now, that might be one reason. I don't want to speak for the insurance companies, but you don't want to have this kind of devastation in your city and have to resolve it through the legal process. First of all, it'll be very slow, and the numbers are just huge. In San Bruno, we were talking at numbers, they won't report the official numbers, but as you add up all the litigation, $6 to $8 billion for a fairly lower density neighborhood. Right? And how would you like to feel, even after $6 to $8 billion spent, the company's still got some serious cultural safety issues. And that's coming to light right now with these fires showing up. They're talking about breaking the company apart. I'm not advocating either one of those options, but people are saying, hey, we spent all this money and you're not any real safer. What's going on? There's a safety cultural issue here. That might be part of the problem that you're facing with here.
Yeah. And I would also say, we know that in the case of San Bruno, which was 8 years ago, litigation is still ongoing in the legal system. We know know that. We also know that insurance companies do deal with it. They're going to charge you for it. And we know all insurance companies have what's called catastrophe modeling. And they do this with hurricanes, and they do it with other big natural events, big fires in cities. And they actually look at history, and they look at risk, and they derive all these extremely complex models and formulas, and they price it into the risk that they write insurance for. And I think in this case, that's the way it'll be done. You won't really see it as a line item. You'll probably still be able to buy insurance. I'm not sure that's true. For instance, if somebody put a $200 million hotel next to that pipeline, I'm not sure they're going to be able to do that and get insurance. I think special risks like that are going to have a heck of a hard time. So if you have one, you can look at a decade of litigation and claims and disputes. And by the way, it affects many, many parties. For instance, the lawsuit could be between a tenant and a landlord. And it could be, partly involving the city. And it could involve the people that caused the damage to the pipeline, not just the pipeline company and the natural gas company. So there's so many parties that get, caught up in that quagmire of litigation and liability. The lawyers will be busy for a decade. Okay? I can say that.
Thank you. And you brought up a moment ago, you mentioned other risks, outside risks. And in Hampton Roads, we have a little problem called sea level rise. And we're also sinking at the very same time. As the ground's lower, is this going to make the land unstable and the land around the pipeline unstable as well?
The answer is yes. Under federal minimum pipeline safety regulations, pipeline operator responsible for assuring that their pipeline can handle abnormal loadings. They have to identify them, they have to run the calculations, and they got to retain the calculations. None of that's come up here. If I read correctly, recall correctly, the independent city consultants kind of blew this issue off. Let me explain to you. A 24-inch pipeline sea level rise can generate a real abnormal loading. There's easy ways to see if they've been designed or built to handle it, but it better be in somebody's file so that it can be independently verified by appropriate contractor systems.
And my understanding is that a site safety review, a site-specific safety review?
It could be captured in that. More likely, it's probably going to, I don't want to be a lawyer, but some of my best friends are.
Okay.
But no, it's definitely captured under the clause abnormal loading that places the sole responsibility on the pipeline operator. Now, they'll dance around it. They may not give you a straight answer to straight questions. But if this is a bona fide threat to the possible future operation of this pipeline, they should have, in citing this pipeline in that particular location, they should have run those calculations and then decided, what actions do they take to ensure that this sea level rise is not going to impair and cause, and by the way, it could cause the pipeline rupture.
Yeah, thank you. And it sounds like that's yet one more safety review that hasn't been done, yet more questions that have not been answered. And so here we are today, really uncertain of what the future will hold with the Southside Connector transmission line. So here's our call to action. I'm going to need some audience participation. Are y'all still there? Yeah. Okay, awesome. Still with me. Actually, like tomorrow. We need to demand that the city take action to terminate the easement that was granted to Virginia Natural Gas. And I'm sorry to hop around here, Bob, but there is a clause, if you will, that paper that we just handed out. We have a copy of the clause that gives the city the option of revoking that permission. That they can say, no, we want a safety stand down. We want to wait until all of our questions are answered. We want to wait until all of the safety reviews have been done. We want to make sure that all of our residents are safe before we start pumping massive pressured gas, only buried 3 feet underground. They buried dead people deeper than that. You realize that, right? It's remarkable that this is what they're putting underneath our feet, next to our schools, next to hospitals, where we live and play and worship. So this is how you can stay in touch with us. This is how you can get copies of some of the information that we shared today. If you're on Facebook, if you're on social media, please visit us on Facebook at 757PSC. Visit our website, 757psc.org. And if you'd like to watch some of the videos that you saw today, and if you'd like to share every video, every website link with your family and friends that live in Hampton Roads, we need everyone involved to plead with our city council to do something to make sure that we're safe. You can go to YouTube, Facebook, and our website.